Okay, welcome everyone. This is the Stephan Livera podcast. We're focused on Bitcoin and Austrian economics. Today, we've got a fantastic interview, very special guest. We have Rodolfo Novak. I'm a big fan, Rodolfo. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, Rodolfo, man, I really like what you're doing with, all the different products you're making. And I think really one theme that I think of when I think of you, I think of like trying to keep Bitcoin cypherpunk and really keep it like to its real roots. So I think today it'll be really great to kind of go into that theme. And I think it's the perfect something you said recently was this idea of, okay, look, you were saying Bitcoin has practically succeeded at decentralized sound money. And to you, the next challenge is decentralizing Bitcoin's communication networks. So Bitcoin's resiliency is only as strong as its capability to be transmitted and out of band verified. So what were you getting at there, Rodolfo?
Yeah, I mean, I don't consider myself a cypherpunk. I just do some cypherpunk thingies. um, so I think it's undeniable now that Bitcoin has succeeded, right? I mean, as a decentralized money system. Like if you last forever, that's a different question. But it has succeeded. I mean, it is completely pervasive, right? Like you can find it anywhere in the world. There's very few people left that have not heard of it. They may not understand it, but people don't understand most things in general.
Yeah.
So, I mean, who understands money really, aside from a bunch of libertarians? So, I think the sort of like the next challenge is like it's not that Bitcoin will be made sort of like globally illegal, globally sort of taken out. I think that boat has sailed. I mean, even if we lost half of the hash rate, is not that big of a deal. It's still really secure. So I really think that making sure that you can transact from places that you're not allowed to transact is the challenge, right? Because you're always going to have, a country that gets a shitty government, right? I mean, yeah, all governments are shitty, but some are shittier than others. So, maybe you're in Venezuela, maybe you're in Iran, maybe you are, in New York. There's all kinds of very sort of dictatorial style systems out there, and they have a tendency to turn off the internet. It's really their MO. And one of the best ways to go around that is to sort of like find, so you can use like mesh nets across the border. You can use like ham radio. You can use LoRa networks. You can use SMS. Even if you just have your phone close to the border, oftentimes is enough to pick up the cell tower of a different country, right? So being able to send those transactions out so they can get broadcasted on the internet and then get mined is very important. And I think like Blockstream, maybe it's like, I don't know how long now, but is it almost 2 years old now, the Blockstream satellite free?
Yeah, something like that. At least a year.
It's been around for a while. I mean, it feels like it's been there forever. So what's really cool about that is that you can download the block data, right, without any like local network. So unlike Francis Coppola, like you don't need electricity. She'll get there. I'm certain she'll get there. She's my favorite troll. Like she can like trigger us Bitcoiners like there is no tomorrow.
Yeah.
But the idea is you can download without any public utility, right? Like you can use a battery and solar cell and a satellite dish with zero like RF footprint, so you can't be found, right? And you can download the block data and keep track of it so that you can still do transactions. And then the challenge is getting those transactions out so you can get them through these other means like Sneakernet, right? I mean, you can put in an SD card. That's what Cold Card does. And you can send those through the border. And then somebody can broadcast it for you and even, use the Blockstream API to send you a message saying, something after, which is pretty neat. I think that's the challenge. Is like, how can we make that stuff like dead simple, I think that's sort of like one of the next things that should be focused on, aside from like all the privacy stuff that is being worked on. But that's more sort of like on a Bitcoin sort of consensus, sort of core level, right? Like that, like the privacy stuff is like inherent to Bitcoin as opposed to the communication, which is just figuring out how to make Bitcoin go around.
Right, yeah, because one part of it is the transaction graph, and then the other part is the communication. That's the part you're talking about here. So maybe let's try and break down some of the methods a little bit, right? So you've got the example you raised around Blockstream satellite, and Dr. Back himself said, look, even with Blockstream satellite, you should not necessarily trust the satellite data. You should verify the block header out of band using SMS.
So here's the really cool thing about compressed blocks, right? So compressed blocks is similar to what the Fiber network uses for miners, right? You can use the block headers. Listen, it is not perfect, right? Nothing is ever, there's always going to be compromise if you are in a compromising situation. So, but you can get that very low bandwidth data, right? The block headers in and check them just to keep a block stream honest. But another cool thing too is the reason why I'm not too concerned about the Blockstream satellite being evil is that it can also check the mining difficulty.
Yeah.
So if the difficulty is high, I mean, the chances that they can master that are pretty low too. So it's not that big of a deal.
You're right. And look, so I mean, that's one method, right?
Yeah.
You've got multiple different methods. You could potentially send a Bitcoin transaction using these SMS gateways. That's another example of communications being done in an atypical fashion.
Totally. People forget that originally cell phone networks were unencrypted, and they were also sort of like pretty mesh netty. The old FDMA systems before the GSM stuff. Actually, you could hack cell phones and listen to other people's conversations just by jumping on their channels. This was a thing that people used to do in the 90s, right? Like, so you can set up, cell tower repeaters from a country that is friendlier, right? Like closer to the border, and get people. You can point antennas. There's all kinds of stuff you can do to get information in and out with just cell phones, not even getting complicated. Right, and then you can use, closed devices like Galtena to sort of do like mesh nets, or you can use the LoRa WAN to do more open mesh nets on LoRa. There is a cool project called Snap on Air. It's like the guy, I don't know like them personally or too much about their story, just their sort of gist. Seems to be like a medical doctor with an electronics degree who created this. It's like a meshnet pager system. So you can send information, right, without any centralized point of failure or point of control. And it's really not that hard with LoRa. Like you can achieve a good 3 to 5 kilometers on LoRa in an open setting. And if it's a more city-like, you can have better antennas and sort of still do quite a bit of distance. And even on those, even if you can just get 1 kilometer, right? Like it's normally enough to jump a border.
Yeah.
So, you can do WiMAX, you can do like, more high power Wi-Fi. One of my favorites is Sneakernet. It's like one of the oldest and greatest. It's been being used since the medieval times. You just have a tiny little piece of device with the information, and you get it from point A from point B. It's kind of how that guy snuck out the pictures of North Korea in his camera, right? Like he hid in the partition of his drive or something, and got a bunch of pictures out. And then you can really go full prepper and go like ham radio.
Yeah, let's go into this. I think you've recently done some work on this. Let's hear it.
So for people who are into amateur radio, like it's not that big of a deal. They understand like the mechanics of this. It just seems like magic, mostly for people who don't understand how radio works, especially when you're doing big waves, right? So when you're doing like 40 meters and 20 meters, like that's like very low megahertz, like 7 megahertz, right? What's really cool about these bands is that they really don't require a lot of power. So you can use like 5-10 watts. Like it really is very little. And you can like get the information across continents, which is pretty fantastic. Now the bandwidth is the hard part, right? Like in these bands, you get almost no bandwidth. So we're talking about like 100 bits a second.
Right.
So it takes like 10 minutes, 15 minutes to send 100 kilobytes. So a Bitcoin transaction will take 15 minutes to go, but you're using essentially no power and you're getting that transaction across the globe, right? That's a big deal. And that's sort of what we did between me and Elaine and Samuel as well. We sent, one of the examples was sending a Brain wallet. And so like I made a Brain wallet that was very short. Of course, it's clear text. We know nobody in those bands were watching for it. So, risk it. And then, but we did send the salt for the Brain wallet in a different band. So then you don't, you can't really have the whole information in one simple monitoring session.
Right. So let me
Then,
just break that down a little bit. So in this example, essentially, you had like a 12-word seed or a 24-word seed and you sent that through one kind of radio frequency, and then you sent like how did you?
it was a 75 bits seed. So we're talking about like it was just 2 words together.
Oh wow. Okay, so it's even less than that. Okay, and then can you just break that down for us? Like how did you do that?
So most of the like the modern nerds, the younger nerds, right? Like we do mostly like we don't actually use the handy, like we don't talk on amateur radio. We just do computer to computer. So we essentially use our radios as a modem, like kind of like dial-up used to be way back in the day. But imagine your computer telling a radio with like a 15-foot antenna that I have on top of my house, sort of like sending the signal all across the planet.
Wow. And so like then what's the range on this kind of thing? How much preparation does it take?
Well, I mean, I have my rig set up on my desk, so I mean, I'm ready to go anytime.
Okay.
I mean, I could hang on. Let me send a signal here. Let's see if we can reach UK. We'll hear if they get it. So.
Oh, sorry. I think we might have lost.
The range is. Hello.
Sorry, we lost you. I think you're back now. Let's go.
Yeah, I think I think my transmission interfered with the Wi-Fi.
Right. Okay.
So, anyways, oh, there you go. That guy. Oh no, that guy is in California. So the range is quite incredible, right? Because these waves are very, very big, so they don't get absorbed by stuff, right? Like by walls or trees. They bounce, and what they do is they're so big that when they reach the ionosphere, right, way above the clouds, they hit it and they bounce back down, and they keep on like skipping up and down across like the planet. Wow. Until they sort of until they either dissipate or get out of phase or whatever. But they can go quite far. And then some people do what's called moon bounces. You use a smaller wave that goes through the ionosphere, but it hits the moon, and then it kind of bounces back into the Earth.
Wow.
Yeah, there's all kinds of cool stuff you can do with these things. And but yeah, the challenge really is bandwidth on this stuff, right? Like these waves are very big, so it's very hard for you to like, jiggle them enough to get data through.
Yeah, right. And then I guess here's the other thing, like what sort of technical skills do you require to do this kind of thing?
I mean, there you can debate the licensing or non-licensing in the libertarian circles, but I mean, I'm a licensed ham, right? What's cool about I mean, you require license in most countries to transmit in these bands. That's a thing, right? And you can get in trouble for not. But I highly recommend doing the test anyways, because the knowledge you need to do the test is going to be the knowledge you need to know how to do this stuff. You need to learn the physics of the stuff. Like you need to learn some electrical and electronics a little bit. Essentially, you need to understand how like radio waves work, and how matching impedance on antennas. And there is a bit of like, this is not like a hobby for everybody. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
But it's really not that hard.
Yeah,
And on
okay.
the receiving side, you can have cheap SDRs, which is really cool. So you can have a cheap, very low skill computer-driven radio that just listens, and then you can actually decode the transactions or information.
Right. So that's the SDR, the software defined radio, right? And that's one of the approaches that I believe Blockstream used to make the satellite, the actual equipment a bit cheaper, but then you need like a more kind of powerful laptop to actually decode that message. Is that right?
Yeah. So what happens? So essentially, like everything that works on radio, like your phone, everything has essentially a receiver, right? A radio receiver. The thing is, what you try to do in better radios or more expensive radios is you have a DSP or an FPGA, right? It's like a hardware specific chip, right? That understands what you're trying to listen to and converts that to the bits of information you want, right? When you have a more general purpose cheap thing, it knows how to listen for everything, but it doesn't really know how to decode anything.
Right.
So you have to use the computer, which is not specialized, to demodulate, decode that information into the bits of data you want.
Fantastic. Okay. And then I think so some of this stuff, like obviously you need to be a bit of a hobbyist. You need to be into it to kind of understand it. I suppose the next level then is how can these things become kind of easier or accessible to the masses? Do you have any ideas around that?
Yeah, so I was actually talking to Adam. I've been trying to convince him to get a dish box, right? Like, you know how you have a dish to watch TV from satellites? If they can find the right one and write the software for it, you can actually have a turnkey satellite receiver, right, on your living room that like is a phone node.
Yeah.
Not,
Wow.
out there. It's just, the Bitcoin market, for trading is massive, right? But the Bitcoin market for like, the people who are on the ground floor, doing the stuff, right? Really caring about nodes, and it's big, but it's too small still for you to build some of these consumer solutions. But they're totally possible, and a lot of the stuff is not like rocket science. It's just we just need the scale.
Right. So in your view, then it's kind of a question of until this market gets big enough that there are enough consumers out there who would be willing to buy kind of some of this, like a dish and maybe a pre-configured laptop in the same way that, we have things like the Casa and the Noddle and so on. Maybe they can have like pre-configured items or pre-configured, plug and play, off you go, plug it in and it'll do it.
Exactly. Or, like for example, the Casa node is only possible to be done at a price point because Raspberry Pis are cheap, right? It's just Raspberry Pis are too like slightly underpowered for what you want in terms of like satellite decoding.
Yeah.
Right. So, eventually either the markets, the economies of scale of general purpose hardware gets there, and then you can do it, or your market gets big enough and then you can do it. It's sort of like, it's going to happen.
Yeah, right. So I guess if it's going to happen, do you have an idea on timing? Like, would you say kind of 5 years until these sorts of products become available for the masses, or what do you think?
2 weeks.
The classic, the BF. I didn't know you were part of BFL, Rodolfo. Wow.
2 weeks. No, you can't time technology. It's, I mean, even us with our products, right? I mean, you get all the stuff done, you have the factory working on it, your product is done, right? And then no, like some part, like say like the ultrasonic welding, like the mold for the ultrasonic welding breaks, right?
Yeah.
And then you happen to be, the Chinese holiday, and then boom, you're late 4 months.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the practice. Yeah.
With hardware, you just never know. We know that.
Yeah.
Personally, I've been the victim of the Chinese holiday.
All right. And I suppose, okay, on this kind of radio wave transmission, what about doing it under adverse weather conditions? Does that impact it or no?
No. Well, yes and no. So the feed, I think, is like 10 gigahertz for the Ku band that Blockstream uses. Like very, very like bad weather will definitely interfere. They are working on having a possible second feed that's delayed, so you can catch up after, which solves that problem. So yeah, that is a problem. For ham radio, weather is not a problem. Sun weather is a problem for ham radio. So like low megahertz, it's like more like electromagnetic issues from the Earth and the sun. Now, when you get into higher bands, right? So like gigahertz, what like molecules in the air start to sort of cause interference.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, because for me, this is like totally new. I don't really understand some of this stuff very well, but it is interesting as well, just to see what the possibilities of it are. Let's talk then. I think you were touching there a little bit around kind of some of the difficulties of kind of making some of this hardware and making some of these products. Let's talk a little bit about Coinkite and, what you've kind of faced when you were making some of the different, the open dime and then the cold card. Do you want to tell us a little bit of insight there?
Yeah. I mean, we started way back, right? We used to have the Coinkite payment terminals and Bitcoin debit cards that we made. That was like 2013, I think. It was a little bit of a few years ahead of its time.
Yeah, perhaps.
It was a fun project. So for a long time, I've been wanting to make a paper wallet, right? That was sort of like dignified of the cryptography, right? And the problem with paper is that one is you have to trust the device that generates the wallet, right? So your computer is already a no-go. Even if your computer is all clean and safe, it's still a very sort of like it's a complex device, right? Complex devices are inherently unsecure because there's more stuff going on there. You just, it's a loss. It's hopeless. And then you have to print the paper wallet. Now, the printer was not designed to do that safely. It gets tricky, right? So we were looking into like, how can we generate, a private key? And then there is the issue that if me, the creator of the paper wallet, give you a paper wallet, you can't trust it because I know the private key. I can redeem the funds after you leave my office, right? That sort of misses the whole point. So, but that becomes a conundrum, right? Like somebody has to create the private key. It has to be safe, sort of like a sound, uncheated private key. So we tried experimenting. Maybe was going to be a provably verifiable laser etching machine, making it on like aluminum plates that would get folded and sort of closed down. But that just became too convoluted. And then we were trying to think like, okay, what if we created a electronic device with like a general purpose chip that you had to like physically alter it so that, if I created the private key and only the device knew the private key, I didn't know, you don't know, then I can give it to you, right? It's like a bearer bond. So we experimented with a few different things, and we came up with OpenDime, where the private key is inside the chip, right? And it generates with your entropy. So Coinkite has no way of ever figuring out how, like, which key is that. Even if we had a rainbow table or anything like that, we just can't. We provably can show it to you that we used your nonce, right? We used your entropy. Essentially, you get this little device, stick it in the computer. He asks you for some entropy, you give it to it, and then he gives you a Bitcoin address to deposit. That's it. You deposit money in it. You, as the sender or the originator, don't know the private key at all, so there is no backup. So be mindful of that in the amount you do. I've heard some interesting stories. Anyway, so be mindful of the amounts and mindful of the device, right? It's a bearer bond. Whoever has it has the money. So once you give it to the next person, they can check, they can cryptographically verify the device. Samurai Wallet, for example, does that on a phone. And then you can give it to the next person, and have zero trace.
Oh, sorry. I think we lost you there for a second. You were just saying you can give it to the next person?
Yes. You.
Oh, sorry, I missed that last bit as well.
Between you and the. Oh, yeah. Are we cutting off?
Yeah, gotcha.
So essentially, when I give it to you, there is no Bitcoin transaction between us on the blockchain, right? There's only a verified transaction inside the device. So there's no trace between us. Now, if you give it to somebody else, there's no trace between the two of you, and so on, right? So you can keep on passing this thing on, hundreds of people, zero trace between each other. Now, the person that wants to redeem that Bitcoin and sell it for US dollars on an exchange, for example, they just poke it through, literally physically poke it. Like there is a place for you to put a push pin, and it's going to break off apart. So it's like physically visible. And once you stick it in a computer, we change an address in the memory of the chip, so you can't just solder back apart or anything like that. It's fairly safe. And that's it. We display the private key.
Yeah, fascinating. And so it's kind of like, because it never touches, right? Each time it gets handed over, it's not actually touching the blockchain, right? It's literally just handed over.
The way I like to say it's like the real Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah,
it's not Big Cash, it's actually Bitcoin Cash.
That's right.
Like you put money in it and you give it to somebody and they have it. Like,
yeah,
it's I don't know, if you ever bought something in person with Bitcoin, you understand the pain of waiting. Like, if you buy a computer off of somebody or something that's like a bit more money, with this, like, there is no wait. You just take the money and go.
Yeah, that's right. And look, we've just got to confirm for the listeners, there was some chatter on Marty Bent and Matt Odell's podcast about the shape of the OpenDime. Whether you updated the design of the open dime such that it could be, how shall
Yeah,
we
so
call it?
I did it in honor of Jensef. So I think it was Jensef who first came up with the idea of the prison wallet. And this was years ago. OpenDime, I think, is like now 4 years old, and it was squared, right? Like very hard edges on it. So I mean, we of course wanted to make the product more pleasing to the eye. We have a certain aesthetics to our products. Very bare PCB, and we love that. But we figured, why not incorporate his desire of smoothness?
Oh, fantastic. Well, look, I mean, so look, if you ever, and I think coming back to the Bitcoiner's kind of favorite no coiner, Francis Coppola, right? This open dime is a great example of enabling a 100% offline transaction that required no power.
No, you don't, because see I think she said she didn't say did she say electricity? She did say electricity, but electric or utilities.
Yeah, it could be. I can't remember the specific
But there is
wording.
a difference, right? And the reality is that there's plenty of places where you can get decentralized power, even in a developed country, right? I mean, you go to cottage country, everybody has a generator or some solar cells, because it's just the reality of living in cottage country. But that's still Canada, and you can still get 5 bars or 4G in the places you may not necessarily get electricity. So this is just somebody, it's like old man screaming at the paper, like it's just I mean, I get the desire of trolling Bitcoiners, but it's very intellectually dishonest to say in 2019 that you can't get electricity somewhere. I mean, even just like batteries. I mean, you can take power anywhere. You can take an iridium cell phone, like to the end of Earth, and have a conversation with somebody while you're going to the end of Earth.
Yeah.
It's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were sharing back Grubel's article. So I think you've probably seen Grubel's article where he essentially talks about like kind of the maximum approach, where he's basically using Blockstream satellite, mesh networking, fully offline, no kind of power or internet himself, but using things like I think it was battery power and then mesh networking to send the transaction.
My radios are running off of battery and a solar cell to keep them up, to keep it charged, just for the fun of it. I mean, I still have like an extra line to charge the batteries, just because I had a ton of snow on top of the solar cells. But I mean, I can run them for like a month on my LifePo like big power cell. Like it's not that big of a deal. I mean, maybe it's just in her life, after understanding how to use the microwave and the fridge, she'll figure out batteries.
That's right. Oh, okay. Yeah. What about mesh networking then? So have you played around much with things like Go Tenor transactions or TX Tenor, anything like that?
So I did play with Go Tennis. They're interesting. I personally don't have a lot of like. It's like I want to like them, but like I get no satisfaction. So I've even broke this one apart and installed an SMA connector so I can use my roof antennas with it. And I just can't get anybody in the third largest city in North America to connect with me. So, and another problem too is that they're closed source, they're closed network. There is some people sort of like hacking them and creating solutions. That's pretty cool. I don't want to diminish that product. It's a cool product and it serves a purpose. I just don't think that that's the future. I think something more like Snap on Air, and the people making LoRaWAN, but not the LoRaWAN that some people claim is hub and spoke, the LoRaWAN that does P2P relays as well. That stuff is way more interesting because it's fully open, right? And that means, this radios I'm playing with, like this ESP32 like devices, they can talk to other devices, provided that we're all speaking the same protocol, and then you can just keep on hopping, right? And you can create your own solutions for it. I find that pretty interesting, especially because with these devices I can have a micro SD slot so that I can broadcast a cold card transaction.
Right. Yeah.
That to me is killer, right? I mean, I use my cold card to sign a transaction, save it to the micro SD card, stick it on the radio, and then poof, it goes.
Yeah, right. And I think that's part of the power, I guess, of keeping things in kind of this sort of standardized, interoperable kind of way, as opposed to everyone coming up with their own standard, right? Can you talk a little bit about how like what approaches are being made there to kind of make a protocol that works across different devices?
Protocols are a funny thing. XKCD has a great protocol cartoon. I highly
Yes.
recommend. There's 10 protocols that don't do what I want. I'm going to create the 15th or something like that.
Yeah.
So there's a few. Goten has their own proprietary sort of thing. Apparently, they do clear text for the public chat. I don't know exactly how their system works, so I'm not going to go there. But LoRaWAN is neat. It's the Things network. It was actually designed for sensors to talk to each other. It is encryption by default, which is really neat. You can't encrypt on ham radio. Like, you can't send covert communication. Is against the rules. Not to say that people don't. But so LoRaWAN, you can use this. This is a cheap M5 stack device from China now. That's sort of a cool little hacking thing for the ESP32 module, and it's just a cheap hacking module with like a general purpose chip that does a lot, and it has a lot of the radios for you, and so you can mess around a lot with something that doesn't require a lot of upfront investment. And there is a lot of there's hats for Raspberry Pis. There's there's essentially modules that you can put for LoRaWAN, right, in most hacking sort of devices, right? So it's not as professional and robust yet as something like as something like Goten. It seems like their devices have quite a bit of work in them already. They've been fairly optimized, but it's open, and you'll get there. I wouldn't be too concerned about that.
Yeah. Okay. And I think another concept that might be interesting for you to touch on, just to help us understand, just around open hardware, open source hardware, because I know that's a big factor for you as well. And like, why is that important?
So a bit of background, I guess. So when we started Coinkite way back, right? Coinkite was centralized wallet. We did multi-sig, so people didn't have to trust us and all that good stuff, right? But it was closed source system, right? Because it was centralized. Now, when we closed it, the challenge was, okay, where do I store my coins? and then I ordered it available sort of like wallets. I had a few already and sort of ordered the newest ones. And, it's just, you ask, each hardware company what they think, and they're all going to come up with different answers, right? So like in my personal view preference, I needed a hardware wallet that was, that they used that had a secure chip in it, right? So it had a secure element in it so that I could store secrets in it. But I also wanted it to be open source, because I'm okay with closed source stuff. My phone is closed source. I don't really care. It's like my computer. Honestly, like I find it hopeless, right? To try to, because even if the phone is open source, the chips are still going to be closed source. It's just like an endless, it's endless pain there trying to make that stuff that's very complex work. But in the place where you actually do key generation, signatures, and things like that for your actual Bitcoins, it has to be open source, because otherwise you cannot trust the device. So if you buy a device that is not open source to generate and maintain your seed, you just don't know if they're doing what they claim they're doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's a lot easier to make something closed source, right? Because you also don't have to worry about security in a way as much. You do, but it's a lot harder for security researchers also to go poke through. So there is an advantage there. Now, I just can't trust it. I don't know if you have a rainbow table. I don't know if you have an accidental rainbow table.
Yeah.
I don't know if you accident. It's just, it's just something I can't trust, especially for Bitcoin wallets, because they are so simple, right? Bitcoin hardware wallets are fairly simple.
Yeah.
But you need a secure element too, and it's always a challenge to find a secure element that you are allowed by the manufacturer to make the source of it public, because all the IP for the secure element is often very closed down, and they don't want that stuff public because it also invites more people poking through.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we did manage to find a chip and talk to the manufacturer and get that stuff done with the 508 from Microchip. So that's the story of Coldcard. It's like, it's a secure element with open source.
Yeah, right. Actually, just one quick question, just for the listeners who aren't aware. Can you just help explain what is a rainbow table?
Oh, it's just sort of like there's a couple. It's essentially, you could pre-calculate what the device is going to calculate in terms of. So say essentially, that the device is going to create a seed with those words. I'm super oversimplifying.
Right. Yeah.
Right here, but so essentially, you as the manufacturer or the attacker, the device is going to create those numbers, right? If that's the entropy, if that's the seeds, if that's whatever it is, but you essentially pre-know what's going to be generated. So you just use that table to generate and steal the money, or steal the keys or the password. Or
exactly.
whatever.
So I suppose then, if the manufacturer, let's say they're really evil, right, and they use this, they set up their hardware and they tell the customers, oh, hey guys, you're generating your own seed, but actually in reality they've set it up such that they know the keys, or they can regenerate all the private keys associated, and then they'll maybe put it out for 6 months, let all the customers store their Bitcoins on this product, and then like do a kind of long con. And
it could be 10 years, right? I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges with this stuff, right? I mean, people get cozy in their cold storage, and they should, right? Like, you don't want to be redoing that stuff all the time. So you need to trust the stuff that generates it for you. That's a very big deal.
Yeah. And now let's talk through how kind of the workflow for a cold card works. So let's say I've bought a cold card and I want to go through that process of, talk through how you set one up, and then how you would like send the transaction by putting the SD card and so on.
Right. So we did it so that you can do USB, or you can do the SD card, right? You don't have to use cold. But for me, it was paramount to create a hardware wallet that could operate without touching a computer ever, right? That to me was very important. So with Coldcard, you can just use a battery, like a USB battery, and you turn it on, and you're going to create. It's going to walk you through creating the seed, right? And then it's going to make you back up the seed and all the good stuff like all the other ones. And then it's going to ask you for a first pin. So you take down, it's up to 6 digits. So you make your 6-digit pin, and then it's going to give you 2 random words that only the secure element of the device knows. So you write those down, and then it's going to ask you to create the secondary pin, and that's up to 6 digits as well. So why did we do that? So if an evil-made attack, right, manages to go through deep lengths to replace the device with some weird stuff there, or radio or something, to try to steal your PIN, right? Once you put your first half of the PIN, if you don't recognize the words, it's like a 2-factor authentication, right? If you don't recognize the 2 words, the second part of the PIN. So if they have the real device in hand, they can't steal your money.
Right. So it's one way of like an early warning system of, if you were to try, it would then say, oh, these are the 2 words. And at that point, it's like the warrant canary. That's like the warning that now,
Exactly.
okay. But then how would you then have to go find your backup seed, or how would you?
Yeah, I mean, if you know you're compromised, you run to your backup seed, and you would sweep those into some other device, take the funds out, recreate your whole setup, right? I mean, if you're compromised, you have to redo all your stuff. So that's one way that we did that. Another thing is the first thing, actually, I should say, is when you get an open diamond. Do I have one here? Though it comes in a tamper-evident bag. So it's the same bag that banks use to put cash in. They're very hard to reseal or to do. They're not perfect, but they're a big deal. And they have a serial number on the bag. And before each code card is bagged, the serial number of the bag is burnt into the secure element of the device.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when you take it out of the bag and you turn it on, it's going to say, does the bag match the serial number? If it doesn't, destroy, rethink your life choices. So, and then you do the pin stuff, right? Now it's going to ask you to do the seed. And then let's say you have a seed. Now, Code Card doesn't have an app. It doesn't do anything related to the internet. It doesn't need a computer. So what it does is, if you want, you will create for you a Electrum skeleton wallet. So just the public part of the wallet, right?
Right, like an XPub, right?
Exactly. And you save it to the SD card. And then you put your code card back into your underground, and then you go and you put your public stuff into Electrum, and boom, you're ready to operate. Now let's say you want to send a transaction out, right? You go on Electrum and you create your transaction, and then you save it to the SD card, and then you take it to the code card, you sign the transaction, and then you take it back and you broadcast it. Or, if you don't care, if this is your warm code card, you plug it in the USB, and it's going to do like all the other hardware wallets that do it. You just make it sign, connect it to a computer. But you don't have to. And that to me is so important. You want to do your hardware wallet signing in an environment where there's no cameras, no radio, like there is no risk of being sort of captured or compromised.
Yeah, right. And I suppose it's interesting, right? If you look at the Glacier protocol, one of the things even the Glacier protocol does is they go to the level of saying you might want to look at having a fan to generate some noise to try and stop side channel attacks, or trying to identify what's going on from the noise of the device.
Exactly. I mean, and not having the computer close to your device is a big deal, right? So, like this is one of the biggest problems with the other wallets, is that they need to be plugged via USB to your computer, right? And if your computer is compromised, or they're using your computer to try to listen to the radio on the device. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the best ways to deal with it is just have nothing. Just grab the device, put your tinfoil hat on, like, go into the bank vault and do your signing there with just the battery, and never be concerned about these problems.
Yeah.
So that's on the signing side. And then we created a few tricky, cool pin things for all the $5 range attacks. So you can have two wallets. So you can have your wallet and then a decoy wallet. The device doesn't tell you which one is what. It's depending which pin you put, it displays with something else. And my favorite is the brick me pin. So if you can set up this pin so that if you type this pin, the device is paperweight.
Wow. Yeah. So it'll just totally nix the whole.
Yeah, because you have a secure element in it. Secure elements have this capability of writing once, right? So unlike one of the competitions is just a MCU, right? So you can't trust an MCU to forget things either. So with the secure element, if you say write this on top of that, it's over. And the device is a brick. Now, keep on beating me, do what you want, but there is no money.
There's no more Bitcoins to steal, right? Yeah. And unless they know what kind of where your backup seed and that kind of thing. But obviously you've got to think about this in advance and have backup plans, that kind of aspect as well. One other area I think is more like just to make sure it's kind of clear for the listeners in terms of what's going on. So let's say you've set up with the code card and you've put the XPub into your Electrum on your main desktop, right? And that's like your watching only wallet. And essentially what you would do when you want to craft that transaction is you're telling Electrum, hey, craft this transaction, but it is an unsigned transaction, right? And then that saves to that SD card, and then you can put that in your cold card, that signs it, and then you put it back to the online computer to broadcast the transaction.
Yeah, and the person responsible for that standard now is Andrew Chow. He created BIP 174 and PSBT files, right? Partially signed Bitcoin transactions. It is really cool because once the rest of the wallets sort of adopt this, now Bitcoin Core does in the latest release, Electrum does, I think Samurai Wallet does. Green Address is going to have at some point soon. So once this standard's been adopted by most, the wallets won't even know which hardware wallet you have.
Yeah, that's a powerful factor as well.
It's a nice thing because now an attacker doesn't know if maybe you have a bucket of the competition wallets on your desk and, they don't know which one has what. And, it's very hard now to link the hardware wallet to the wallet. I find that one of the best features of this, the standard.
Yeah, and it does remind me a little, people like to talk about this concept of using, where they can, general purpose hardware, right, rather than specific hardware. And I know Trace Mayer is big on this whole idea of using Purism Laptop and Glacier Protocol because he knows that other people can't surmise exactly what that Purism laptop is being used for. Whereas if I know that you hold, this specific device that only holds Bitcoin, well, then I know you're probably holding Bitcoin with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been through the cycles of trying to think this through, and in all honesty, I just like modern operating systems and modern computers, they're just the level of complexity. It's just the sheer amount of lines of code that are in there, right? It's literally impossible to know, right? While with a purpose device, there really isn't, it's on GitHub. You can load the source yourself into the device, and that's it. You lose the plausible deniability of the device. But getting a hardware wallet these days, I mean, it's not that hard, right? I mean, half airports now sell them. It's
Yeah.
not, you can go buy cash somewhere and be done with it. And another nice thing too that you get with a secure element is a true random number generator, a TRNG. So it's a very powerful random number generator. Better than that, only the dice.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's just such a difficult area, and there's so many different. I guess if you're a newbie coming into this space, you would hear this person telling you that, and that other person telling you this, and it's very difficult. But I think ultimately you just kind of have to pick who you think is kind of trustworthy to kind of give you good advice if you're a newbie, and just hope that they've kind of put you down that right pathway.
Being your own bank has a cost.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, nobody can take what's yours, but you can also screw yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
It's Bitcoin really takes us back to the early days of Federal Express. It's like Chariot, the gold is there, shotgun, and sort of like, go across America now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to some extent, it's like I think this is a common thing many Bitcoiners say is, the first investment you have to make is education. You just have to go out and try and learn as much as you can to at least figure out who you think is solid and who you think is maybe not as solid.
Yeah, I mean, and we've done a lot, right? I mean, like this essentially 10 years now of Bitcoin, right? I mean, like things have gotten a lot easier to use, and we're still fairly early, right? I mean, things will still get much better. I mean, it took 30 years to order groceries on the internet properly.
Mm.
Like it's just it takes time, and if you want to be an early adopter, you get to be an early adopter. You get to, register, Microsoft.com and then sell to them. Or, you get to buy Bitcoin early. But you have risks with that. And sort of like, it's important for people to sort of gauge how much risk they're willing to do. And education really is the only salvation.
Yeah. Look, excellent comments there. Look, Rodolfo, I think we're getting to time, so maybe just tell the listeners where they can find you, where they can find, Coinkite, why they should look into Coinkite and the cold card, open dime, etc.
Yeah, so I mean, we make devices, because we want to make devices. We want to have some fun in Bitcoin and make different things. You can find most of the stuff we make on Coinkite.com, and then there is a cold card, open dime, the block clock now, and you can find me on Twitter at NVK. And I mean, that's it, really.
Fantastic. Well, look, I think, it's been really great discussing with you. Listeners, make sure you press subscribe and give me a thumbs up, share this stuff out. But otherwise, Rodolfo, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed discussing with you and hope to chat with you again soon.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.